Vuol dire che ne...
The old Chinese axiom, ladies and gentlemen, says, one picture is worth 1,000 words. And if you take a look at this next photo, I think you are going to end up with more than just 1,000 words. Because the next dictator we're going to be looking at, if we are to go exactly by the precepts of the Illuminati, the next dictator would be Barack Obama. Now, I'm not saying this lightly or just throwing out a name just to be mean. What we're going to be doing, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to, in order to understand what's going on nowadays, we're going to do comparisons between Obama's regime and the other regimes of the past we've just gone through, plus the 7-part plan of the Order of the Illuminati. And we're going to see if the past agrees with the present. And if it does, this is going to tell us a lot of why Obama is doing what he's doing and why. Let's start, first of all, with, if you remember, back in Nazi Germany, they had what was known as das Reichsverbot, which is the oath, the allegiance. Now, if you recall, according to this photo, Nazi soldiers had to take an oath of allegiance to Hitler, not to the Constitution, not to the people, but to Hitler himself. Now, in an ABC interview concerning his flip-flop on gay marriage, Barack Obama said, "When I think about those soldiers or airmen or Marines or soldiers who are out there fighting on my behalf, hold the boat right there, wait 1 second. No soldier, not one out there, is out there fighting on your behalf, Mr. Obama. They've taken an oath to the Constitution. They did not take an oath to you. So therefore, they are not out there fighting on your behalf, as it would have been said of the Nazi soldiers fighting for Adolf Hitler." Interesting enough, when we talk about taking oaths of allegiance and things like that, if you look at this next photo, you will see Natalie Portman with her hand over a heart, and on her hand it says women's rights. You see, there's a movement with those who adulate Barack Obama by coming up with these allegiances. They will put their hand over their heart and they will write down something that they say Barack Obama was responsible for, and so I'm pledging allegiance to him. Now, according to what she's writing on her hand, it says women's rights. Guess what, Natalie? You're a day short and $1 late when it comes to this one. Because women's right had already been given almost 100 years ago by the Constitution, you know, the amendments and all this. Try to catch up, hon. And then there is Jessica Albi. She, on one hand, it says equal pay and the right to choose. Here's another one who is $1 short and a day late. Equal pay, excuse me, it's called the 1980 Equal Pay Act. That happened more than 30 years ago. And if there is supposed to be equal pay going on right now, then again, Jessica Alba is off the mark, because men in the White House, for every dollar they get paid, women are only getting paid 88 cents. And yet Obama is saying, I'm making fair equal pay for everyone. And yet, in his own administration, for those people who work for him, the women are only getting paid 88 cents compared to the dollar that men are making. Now, when it comes to pledging allegiance, nothing will infuriate me more than this, ladies and gentlemen, because I am an Army veteran. And when I see Old Glory flying by to this very day, if I'm not in uniform, you know, for maybe a veterans thing, I always place my right hand over my heart to this very day. But if you take a look at this photo here, you will see the commander-in-chief, or chief, whatever we're calling him. He can't be bothered. Look at where his hand is. He's just acting like a slob, just putting his hands like that, while everyone else has put their hand over their heart and they're saying the Pledge of Allegiance. But no, he can't be bothered. And if you take a look at this next photo, you can see again military officers dressed in their uniform, while Barack Obama is just standing there. He can't be bothered to salute Old Glory, the symbol of Americana. And if you look at this next photo, this is at a Memorial Veterans Day service. Again, you can see everyone there saluting the flag, Old Glory. But again, Barack Obama can't be bothered. Now, doesn't this strike you as just, not just odd, but just wrong? He's supposed to be the commander-in-chief, and yet he won't salute the flag of our nation, let alone the flag of Americana. And in this next photo, when he finally does salute, if you look directly behind him, his wife, Michelle, can't be bothered. You can see she's got her arms crossed and she looks very annoyed that everyone else is saluting Old Glory. And the killer, the real killer is, when both of them finally decide to salute, they don't even get it right. They got their left hand over nothing. There's nothing there. The heart's over here underneath the fifth rib. Over here, nothing. And then if you look at this next photo, Barack is saluting the wrong flag. You know, you would think eventually he'd figure this out. He is supposed to be the commander-in-chief, and his wife is supposed to be the first lady. What else? Aside from, shall we say, oaths of allegiance, though other dictatorships in the past have in common here. What do they have in common also? Well, when we look at this next photo, you will see the famous front gates of that German concentration camp in Auschwitz. And right above the gate, you can see it. It's in German. Arbeit macht frei, which from the German means work makes you free. I don't see how in that case, because no one ever worked long enough in a concentration camp to where they could just walk out. But you can see the point here being that there were approximately 1,200 such concentration camps throughout Germany. And if you look at these next photos, ladies and gentlemen, whether or not you want to believe this or not, the pictures are going to say for themselves. We have had concentration camps here in America for close to 35 years now. Look at these photos here. The photos you're looking at right now are of the POW camp at the Nellis Air Force Base. I think in this next photo, it says it all. This is a sign found at Fort Dix, New Jersey, and it completely says what it is. This is a prisoner of war compound. P-O-W. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, how much clearer, how much more succinct could we possibly make it? P-O-W. They had POW camps in Nazi Germany under that dictator. They had him under the dictator known as Stalin, under the dictator known as Lenin. And now, in America, once again, under Barack Obama. Here we have, ladies and gentlemen, a POW camp in Genoto, Utah, by the Utah Lake. This is in Utah, as I recall. Now, if you take a look at this map, ladies and gentlemen, this is only a partial listing of all those FEMA camps or POW camps in America. I've counted personally, we're just about up to 1,000 right now. And if it keeps growing, we're going to get beyond 1,000 by the time this year, 2014, is gone. But if you look at that map, ladies and gentlemen, there's no way I could put all 1,000 on this map. But that's how many there are. And if you don't think this is true, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at this next photo, this is taken directly from the construction notebook. Now this is a note, like a newspaper type thing. If you check the date, you're looking towards the upper right hand corner right now. It says March 23rd, 1998. And in red, you will notice it says the job description is Clark County Training Area Enemy Prisoner War Camp. That's what it says right there in the actual notebook. This is the bidder's notebook, the contracts themselves that they're bidding for. This one clearly says you're going to be building a POW camp. And right underneath it says where. It's going to be, about 300 yards north of the old Union Pacific Railroad. I mean, how clear could it be, ladies and gentlemen? That's exactly what the contract says. And when we take a look at this next photo, ladies and gentlemen, this is a letter from the Congress of the United States. And this is specifically from Mr. Bill Hefner. The question was posed to him on these concentration camps and such. He wrote back and says, "Enclosed is the information you requested pertaining to the Army's policy and guidance for establishing civilian inmate labor program and civilian prison camps on Army installations. This information has not yet been published. It is currently at the printers. However, it has been funded, staffed, and does reflect current Army policies." So these FEMA camps, these POW camps, have the approval of the Army, they're staffed, and they are fully funded. It doesn't get any more clear than that. Now, if you remember, we had showed how the Nazis transported their prisoners onto these railroad boxcars. Now, if you take a look at this next photo, we see the railroad cars that had taken the people to the concentration camps. Now, you would think, well, that would never go on here in America. That was just Nazi Germany. Yeah, we may have POW camps in here in America, and almost 1,000, but we don't have this. And unfortunately, we're about to. You see, I want you to take a good look at this next photo, ladies and gentlemen. And you can see the heading says Rail Chain Tie Down Assemblies. Now, before going on, look towards the bottom right, and you will see the date under where it says synopsis. The date is not even a year ago. It's only 6 months ago. It says October 9th, 2013. Now, what are these rail chain tie down assemblies? Let's go to the next photo. I want you to take a look here. This is October 9th, 2013 again. It goes on to say, let's just read it, pick it up from the top a little here. It says, this is a pre-solicitation notice for a low price, technically acceptable source selection resulting in a requirements contract for approximately 3,000 rail chain tie-down assemblies. What this, ladies and gentlemen, is they're talking about shackles that would be built into the walls and onto the floors of these railroad boxcars. That's what this contract is all about. They're starting off with 3,000 to check to see how fast it can be done and how cost efficient. Once this is determined, I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to move on this with the speed of light, because they've got the railroad cars now, just like Hitler had his railroad cars in Nazi Germany. But unlike those people in Nazi Germany who wouldn't fight back, you try to put Americans in a railroad box fight, in a boxcar, and if you don't have them chained down, they are going to fight back, and they're going to come back with a vengeance. Now, what's even more interesting, remember, Nazi Germany had their railroads, cars. And now, as you can see, they have their boxcars. And the method of execution they did was through gas, poison chemicals, poison gases. And we use similar methods here in the United States. We don't put them in a gas chamber, but we do inject them, with these deadly chemicals so that, they die through lethal injection. However, something almost pathetical is going on right now. I want you to take a look at this next photo. This is a clipping from Forbes magazine. Look at what the caption reads. It says, United States no longer makes death chamber drugs, and the European Union won't supply them. Time to revive the guillotine, says pundit. You see, we find out in Revelation chapter 20, verse 4, that those who refused to take the mark, the name, or the number of the beast, they were beheaded because they witnessed of Jesus Christ. This is still a future event to come. But we find out that those saints who were martyred then, it was through beheading. And throughout history, beheading is probably the single most economic method of executing anyone. I mean, it's quick, it's easy, efficient. That's it. All you have to do is just wipe the blade every now and then or sharpen it, and you just continue. And in those days, under the soon-to-arrive Antichrist, guillotines are literally going to be moving that fast. And another interesting comparison we look at this first photo, if you remember, well, this was Joseph Mengele, or in the German, as the prisoners used to call him, Todesengel, the angel of death. You know, as bad as it may sound, yeah, they had Todesengel, you know, the angel of death. And in this next photo, well, guess who we've got? And with him, we've got Obamacare. And what's even more interesting, with Obamacare, a lot of people have been saying, well, certain parts of it sounds like there's, you know, like those death boards like they had under T4 in Germany under Adolf Hitler. Well, isn't that what's going on right now? And I mean right now. And it's only been going on for 2 weeks to the public side, but this has been going on for years. What's been going on at the VA clinics? Right now, 19 states have VA clinics that are reporting these secret lists in which patients quite literally have been put on those secret lists, and those people on the secret list are the ones that have been waiting for 6 months, a year, some even longer, to receive treatment for cancer, leukemia, and other life and death situations. And those people have been purposely put on those lists. Those are actual, in my medical opinion, death lists. Because those people who are put on it, they're not being helped. They're the old veterans from the day and age when I served at the end of Vietnam. And these people who served their country are now being pushed to the side and said, you're just going to have to wait. It's not that they can't be treated. It's just that they're being treated exactly like those same people on the death list during the Nazi regime. They're old. They're infirmed. They've got life and death diseases. So just like they did with the T4 program under Hitler, they're getting rid of these people by not treating them. And mind you, those people who are making up these fake lists and saying, oh, we've got wonderful turnover and everything, these people have been getting bonuses left and right. Ladies and gentlemen, I know where this is heading, and it terrifies me, because if we're going to do this to our own veterans, the people who've lived and died for God and country, can you imagine the nightmare that's going to be happening 3, 4, 5 months down the road when Obamacare kicks in fully? And it's going to affect the employers who have the employees, you know, I think it's what, 50 or above, they're going to have to pay for their, 50 or below, they're going to have to pay for their private, if you would, Obamacare or whatever, you know, they're going to have to pay for it, or they're going to have to pay these huge fines. And those people who were counting on Obamacare to cover them, well, now they're going to have to go out and buy it on their own because their poor bosses can't afford it. And yet, we were promised we would be saved $2,500 every single year, every single one of the families in America who took Obamacare. Ladies and gentlemen, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I think we're being ripped off here. And then another comparison. Let's look at how Hitler was always taking vacations near Berchtesgaden. Now, I don't blame him. Berchtesgaden is a wonderful place, you know, but I think he should have been more busy paying attention to what was going on in his own country, you know, during World War II. And yet, when we take a look at this next photo, let's do another comparison, ladies and gentlemen. This is another incident of Obama and his family on yet another vacation. Now, so far, and some people may say I'm being critical here, but Obama so far has taken 96 vacation days. Now that's not as much as some presidents in the past have, but right now, these vacations and such had been taken during sequestration. Where was he getting all the money to take all these vacations if we were on sequestration and we couldn't pay for anything? He's also played 135 rounds of golf, which averages out to a full round of golf every 2 weeks. Now, why Michelle Obama has taken 180 vacation days, almost twice as many as her husband, is beyond me. She's the first lady. I don't even know if she's done anything constructive aside from starve our children to death in the public school by cutting their lunches in half. Aside from that, I really don't know what else she's done. And she and her daughters have taken, to this date, ever since Obama's been in the White House, they have taken 16 vacations. 16. And this is during a recession, and this is on the taxpayers' dollars. And mind you, speaking of dollars, so far they have spent over $10 million on these luxury vacations. But that's just another one of those comparisons. Now this comparison, ladies and gentlemen, I think it says it all. Now, we know that Hitler gave good speeches and he had his own personal logo. You know, the swastika? Well, isn't that funny? Everyone tells me Obama gives good speeches. I don't think they're great, and it's not because I'm biased. It really isn't. But I just don't think they're that great. But one thing he does have that no other president in all of United States history ever had, he has his own personal logo, as this photo proves. You can see Hitler has his, and Obama has his own. And when it comes to gun control, oh my goodness, ladies and gentlemen, let history answer this one. I mean, Idi Amin, Joseph Stalin, Pol Pot, Adolf Hitler, Mao Zedong, Muammar Gaddafi, Kim Jong-il, Fidel Castro, and so many others, they all agreed on gun control by making sure it's registered, that they had absolute control over all registrations, or they just took them completely away. But every single one of them said you had to gain control of the weapons. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have been, by the grace of God, moving and kicking for quite a while now. As my director, Corey Black, pointed out when we were eating dinner, he says I'm older than dirt. Fact of the matter is, I am more than twice his age, so I've been around the block more than once. And I've heard a lot of things in this life, ladies and gentlemen, but few things. I can't even think of one thing, actually, that was more blatantly stupid than this next picture I'm going to show you. This is of Dianne Feinstein, you know, Senator Dianne Feinstein of California, on gun control. Now, read along with me, ladies and gentlemen. It says, and this is a direct quote from Feinstein now, "When the gunman realizes that nobody else is armed, he will lay down his weapons and turn himself in. That's just human nature." Oh, really? Dianne Feinstein is trying to convince you and me that human nature tells us that when no one else has weapons, the gunmen are going to turn themselves in and just lay down their weapons? You know, I'm sorry. I mean, this lady must have done what Hillary Clinton did. She must have ended up with a major concussion for the last 6 months if she believes this nonsense. I mean, really? Does she really think that if all the weapons of the honest people, now mind you, ladies and gentlemen, it's the honest citizens who never use the weapons, it's in their homes, it's only there literally for self-defense, And this lady is going to tell me if all those weapons vanish, well, the bad people are just going to lay down their guns because that's human nature. And then they're going to turn themselves in. Now, isn't that the most obtuse thing you've ever heard? I mean, how did this lady ever even get in Congress to begin with is beyond me. And yet, when we take a look at another comparison here, we, if you notice, Hitler, if we take it back, let's go to Lenin in Russia. He used his secret police, the Cheka, to keep tabs on everyone. Well, so did Lenin. And you'll find out, obviously, so did, and they're still doing it in Russia under Pravda-controlled media. And they did the same thing in Hitler under the SS. And if you notice here, ladies and gentlemen, this slide here is from a secret program within our own government known as PRISM. Now, I did a presentation on this during the Prophecy Summit last year in Colorado Springs, 2013, under the auspices of Prophecies in the News. You'll find out that Project PRISM is an elaborate, secret program done under the NSA, and this is a collection agency. They're spying. They're using 9 various methods to spy on American people. Now, if we look at the bottom and work ourselves up, you can find that they're using organizations such as Microsoft, Yahoo, Google, Facebook, Paltalk, YouTube, Skype, AOL, and Apple products. They have literally been going through the back doors of these operating systems so that they could spy on us. And right now, it has been proven, and they've done this. They have proven, and they've just arrested a number of people who have been spying on American students and others through the camcorders, or, you know, the little recording devices here on top of, on a laptop. Those are little cameras there. You can actually hack into and watch people in the privacy of their own home. And it wasn't too long ago that, I believe it was the 2012 Miss USA or Miss Universe, she was being spied on herself. Someone was spying on her through her own camera. I believe that was built into her laptop. Someone was invading the privacy of her own home and taking photos of them, and was showing some, and I think selling some of them on the net. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, the technology is there. Barack Obama has been using, and even the in the court records have been showing, that we have been spied upon by our own government. And this is the same elaborate spy system, just technologically advanced now, that was used in Nazi Germany. They spied on their own people. We are being spied upon also. Now, what's really interesting, this next one. If you take a look at this next photo, this is the ancient symbol for the Thule Society. Remember that occult religion in America that was, among other things, building UFOs, you know, those flying saucers? Well, if you would take a look at this next photo, you will see Barack Obama wearing a very unusual t-shirt. The person on that t-shirt is Aleister Crowley. Aleister Crowley was considered by his contemporaries, well, his contemporaries called him Mr. 666, and his own mother referred to him as the Beast because people said he was the foulest, the most evilest person who ever walked the earth. And as it says, as a practicing Satanist, this guy was so deep into what he was doing. In one particular ritual, it was a long ritual. I won't tell you which one it is. You don't need that information. But during this particular ritual, his own son lost his life. Aleister Crowley was that type of depraved, debauched, sick individual. And yet, it is true, he was one of the most powerful Satanists that ever lived. But look at what it cost him. So why is it President Obama is wearing a t-shirt that would glorify such a despotic Satanist. Interesting enough, if you look at this first photo, you will see Adolf Hitler behind a podium, and he was calling for New Weltordnung. This is German for New Order. Now that was back in 1938. And yet, when we take a look at this next photo, we can see Barack Obama in front of the UN Assembly, that is, and he was calling, and this was back in October of 2009, he was calling for a new world order, just like Adolf Hitler had been. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of easy contrasts and comparisons excuse me, that we can make. History will show these things quite easily, and we really need to listen to history. There was one person in particular. His name was Marcus Tullius Cicero. He lived 106 BC to about 43 BC. And he gave us a very, very interesting warning. And mind you, as I said, this was more than 2,100 years ago. Now listen to what Marcus Tullius Cicero stated. He said, "A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within. An enemy at the gates is less formidable, for he is known and carries his banner openly. But the traitor moves amongst those within the gate freely, his sly whispers rustling through all the alleys, heard in the very halls of government itself. For the traitor appears not a traitor. He speaks in accents familiar to his victims, and he wears their face and their arguments. He appeals to the baseness that lies deep in the hearts of all men. He rots the soul of a nation. He works secretly and unknown in the night to undermine the pillars of the city. He infects the body politic so that it can no longer resist. A murderer is less to fear. The traitor is the plague." Thus far, ladies and gentlemen, we've taken a good look at a number of dictators in the past. Lenin, Stalin, Hitler, so on and so forth. Now, what I want to do is take the past, and if you would, through historical comparisons and analyses, bring it up to present date, and see if anything that's going on now remind you of those things in the past. Remember, as I said in the beginning, in order to understand the present, we have to go into the past first. Well, we've gone into the past, now let's bring that up to present day and see if there are any things, as I just stated, that's familiar. Now, when we look at Lenin's youth group, and Vladimir Lenin did have a youth group, well, he had a youth group in particular. It was called the Young Pioneer Camp, that had many benefits to it if you joined it, but it also served as schools of indoctrination. So if you ended up in Lenin's youth group, chances are you might have gone in as a youth, but you'd come out later on as a youth that was fully sold out to socialism. And then, of course, Mao Zedong had a paramilitary youth group that was known as the Red Guard, and they were formed between 1966 and 1967. Mussolini also had a youth group, and he called it the Black Shirts. And then, of course, Adolf Hitler had a paramilitary youth group known as the Brown Shirts. Now, going to the past, we saw that there was youth groups and all these various forms of dictatorships under various forms of government. As we already stated, there was socialism, communism, fascism. Now let's bring this up to capitalism under Barack Obama and see if he, by any chance, has a youth group. And if we look at this next photo, you can easily tell he does. He has a paramilitary youth group, and they have camouflage pants on with a black shirt, and they all pledge allegiance to Obama. And Barack Obama, if you remember when he was talking about this, saying he wants the numbers to be as high as a regular standing army, in that eventually they have these paramilitary ability and authority that goes with it. Now, let's look into, again, the past, into the secret police. Now, Lenin used the secret police of Russia. They were known as the Cheka, and he used his secret police to spy on all of his people. Stalin, as you can tell by this photo, he had his own secret police afterwards. This next photo, as the old Chinese proverb goes, one picture is worth 1,000 words. This one's speaking volumes, because Mao Zedong had his secret police, and you can see what's going on in this scene here. This man's about to be brutally executed because he disagreed with something that was in Chairman Mao's opinion or in his government. Of course, one of the most infamous of all the police squadrons, if you want to call them that, was the Schutzstaffel that was under the authority of Heinrich Himmler. But of course, Heinrich Himmler, like everyone else, answered to Adolf Hitler. And of course, Obama has his secret police, and I mean quite a lot of different ways, shall we say, that he can use this policing authority. He has the FBI, the CIA. Let's not forget the NSA scandal of 2013, just last year. Look at how they use the IRS against us to keep us in a state of fear or terror of losing everything or possibly being thrown in prison if we disagree with them. Let's not forget, remember, it was the NSA that was using the IRS to help target Tea Party groups or anyone who disagreed with Obama's political platform when he was running for a second term in 2012. This news has broken, and it is still being investigated, even though right now a committee has been formed by the Republican Party because they want to investigate even deeper into, the events of Benghazi. And Nancy Pelosi just today stood up there and said that they're going to put in 5 Democrats, she says, to keep it balanced, to keep it fair, so that this doesn't become some type of hangman's lynching type thing. She was all but saying that the Republicans can't be honest, they can't be trusted, they're not going to be fair or impartial about it. And the funny thing is, she was saying, all the facts are known. Well, you know what? 61% of the American population disagrees with her. They want the investigations into Benghazi looked into it further because more questions haven't been answered than anything else. We want to know what really happened, and we need the proof to document this. So eventually, I think people at very high levels are going to be brought down because of this. But these are just a couple of examples of how Barack uses governmental secret police, if you want to call them that, to keep tabs on us, to spy on us, and to keep us under control if they think we're getting too far out of hand, just like the Nazi did and those in the Russian police system also. Now, one thing that always fascinated me were, and it's probably because of my days back in the Illuminati, were different symbols, the combinations of numbers and letters, because it was always used to denote certain meanings which you needed to use in rituals. Particular logos and such, most of these you folks should easily recognize, like this next one here. Everyone usually recognizes what's known as the hammer and the sickle. And this symbol was brought into play in Russia under Lenin and was used by Stalin as their logo. When we look at Mao Zedong, he was always denoted with some sort of nimbus and stars around him, giving him a godlike appearance. And of course, who could forget the symbol of the Nazi regime under Adolf Hitler, that being the swastika. And here is something more interesting than anything else. Barack Obama is the first and the only president in U.S. history who has his own personal logo. And if you look at these pictures, you'll see that Air Force One used to have the American flag on it, you know, Old Glory. But Obama has done away with that and put his own personal logo, the one he was using during his 2008 run for the presidency. That's on Air Force One now. Old Glory has vanished. We know that throughout other dictatorships that they controlled the media. And I mean, they controlled almost every word that was coming out of the media. We look at this next photo, you can see this is the newspaper from Russia. It's known as Pravda. Now, anyone who opposed Stalin in the media would usually be given a show trial and then shot. Mao Zedong, he used, obviously, and controlled the media in China. Now, these next few photos, these are very, very interesting ones. These are actual posters that were put up around Italy under Mussolini's reign. You see, back then, during the late 1920s, 30s, and early 40s, 90% of Italians were illiterate, so they couldn't read the propaganda in the papers. So what they did in Italy, they made these very clever posters that would bring across the meaning of what they were trying to tell the people. In this first one, you see Mussolini looking down. Now, it almost looks like he's wearing some sort of jacket, but if you look carefully at the photo, those literally are hundreds and hundreds of people. And he's looking down at them as if he was a god looking over his people. And of course, Adolf Hitler, I think we all know how much Adolf Hitler had controlled the media, and there's just a couple examples for you folks to look at there. Now, it's interesting. There was a man known as John Swinton who worked for the newspapers. And upon a colleague's retirement, he was asked to give up, to stand up and give the toast or the speech. Now, I want you to listen very carefully to what John Swinton had to say about the media. He said, "There is no such thing in America as an independent press, unless it is in country towns. You are all slaves. You know and I know it." Now, he's speaking to his fellow media people there in this huge gathering now. "There is not one of you who dares to express an honest opinion. If you express it, you would know beforehand that it would never appear in print. I am paid $150 for keeping honest opinions out of the paper I am connected with. Others of you are paid similar salaries and doing similar things. If I should allow honest opinions to be printed in one issue of my paper, I would be like Othello before 24 hours. My occupation would be gone. The man who would be so foolish as to write honest opinions would be out on the street hunting for another job. The business of a New York journalist is to distort the truth, to lie outright, to pervert, to vilify, to fawn at the feet of Mammon, and to see his country and his race for his daily bread, or what amounts to be the same, his salary. You know this and I know it. And what foolery to be toasting an independent press. We are the tools and vassals of rich men behind the scenes. We are jumping jacks. They pull the strings and we dance. Our time, our talents, our lives, our possibilities are all the property of other men. We are intellectual prostitutes." Now, if you folks will recall, in, I believe it was DVD 3 in my series, I expose and show how we lost control of the media in America. Now, take a good look at this next photo. You will see that this gentleman here was U.S. Congressman Oscar Callaway. And he purposely made sure to insert into the official records of Congress what had happened as far as he knew, how the media had been taken over in America. Now, this is going to be a little bit lengthy, but I want you folks to hang with me. I'll ask my director to make sure to put up exactly what I'm going to read to you, ladies and gentlemen, so you can read along. Now, in the U.S. Congressional Records of February 9th, 1917, it begins on page 2947. It begins with Mr. Callaway. Mr. Callaway stands up and says, "Mr. Chairman, on the unanimous consent, I insert into the record at this point a statement showing the newspaper combination which explains their activity in the war matter, just discussed by the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Moore." In March 1915, the J.P. Morgan interests, the steel, shipbuilding, and powder interests, and their subsidiary organizations got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States and sufficient number of them to control generally the policy of the daily press in the United States. These 12 men worked the problems out by selecting 179 newspapers and then began by an elimination process to retain only those necessary for the purpose of controlling the general policy of the daily press throughout the country. They found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. The 25 papers were agreed upon. Emissaries were sent to purchase the policy, national and international, of these newspapers. Excuse me. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought to be paid for by the month. An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit information regarding the questions of preparedness, militarism, financial policies, and other things of national and international nature considered vital to the interests of the purchasers. This contract is in existence at this present time, and it accounts for the news columns of the daily press of the country being filled with all sorts of preparedness arguments and misrepresentations as to the present condition of the United States Army and Navy and the probability of the United States being attacked by foreign foes. This policy also included the suppression of everything in opposition to the wishes of the interests served. The effectiveness of this scheme has been conclusively demonstrated by the character of the stuff carried in the daily press throughout the country since March 1915. They have resorted to anything necessary to commercialize public sentiment and sandbag the National Congress into making extravagant and wasteful appropriations for the Army and Navy under false pretense that it was necessary. Their stock argument is that it is patriotism. They are playing on every prejudice and passion of the American people. So, even as early as 1915, it had become known that J.P. Morgan, a very well-known, influential, and powerful member of the Order of the Illuminati, had bought up 12 major newspapers, and once he had that, quite literally, he had control over the news of America. What we would be told, what we would be found out, what would purposely be left out because supposedly it's in the national interest. In other words, they don't want us to know the truth because we would eventually just vote them out of office and put honest people in that we know we could trust. And this is what's going on right now, even in this primary year election. Now, as I stated before, if you folks would like to find out more information in detail about this, It is in DVD 3 of this series, and it's called Frontmen of the Illuminati. Now, when we go again back into the past and we compare dictators, another common thread can easily be seen. You will find that these dictators are given what's known as an air of apotheosis, or a godlike appearance, or attributes of divinity. When we take a look just quickly at Adolf Hitler, if you look at the bottom of this poster, it says Es lebe Deutschland, okay, which is this is Germany. And the next one over it says Gott mit uns, or God with us. Now look at how in the first one there is that nimbus, that glowingness right behind Adolf Hitler, that's giving him that godlike appearance. And in the next one again, where it said Gott mit uns, literally speaking, you see Adolf Hitler in front of an ecclesiastical building now, and it says God with us. Again, they're attributing Hitler being a god. In this first photo, you will see Benito Mussolini. Now, you would have to know a little bit of history here, but the way Benito Mussolini is standing, his arms like this and such, he is actually taking on the pose of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, known as the Colossus of Rhodes. You folks could easily look up the Colossus of Rhodes, Rhodes, on the internet. I know they have to have something there about this. Now remember, they were using posters because most people in Italy were illiterate. So this again gives him that godlike appearance because he's the Colossus of Rhodes here. And if we look at this next photo, you will see Pope Pius XI, and this is what he said of Mussolini. Mussolini sent by God to redeem society. So again, we have this attribute of divinity there. He is the personal chosen person of God himself. God sent to us Mussolini. And next we'll get into Fidel Castro. In the photo it says Idea Centro en la Habana, which means and God came in Havana. They're saying that God in this photo is Fidel Castro, and he came to Havana. He's our savior. And in this next photo, there was always a motto that went with this photo. This is what I thought was really interesting. The others didn't necessarily come with a motto, but in this next one, when this one was up, this symbol, it was always said that the motto behind it was the driven Cuban and his God, Fidel Castro. Again, we have that divine attribute given to him. Now, look at this next photo of Vladimir Lenin. You see that nimbus, that glow all around him? Again, it gives that divine appearance, as if this particular person is godlike. And when Lenin, as a matter of fact, Stalin, when Joseph Stalin had died, we see in this first photo that glow again. And the papers ran the articles that read like this. It would say, Stalin, the funeral of a god. And in this next photo of Stalin, the logo that went with it, or the article that ran with it, it said, as much a deity as a dictator, or as much a god as a dictator. Again, we have this apotheosis, this godlike divinity. And Mao Zedong, I mean, my goodness, just about most of the old posters or anything you can find on him, there was always that nimbus, that halo surrounding him, and you can see it in this first photo. how the people are gathered and there's those rays behind him. And again, in this next photo, you will see that glow, that nimbus around the visage of Mao Zedong. Having said all those comparisons, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring it up to the present date and once again see if there's any similarities. Now, in this first photo, we see Barack Obama with a thorny crown and positioned as Christ had been positioned on the Christ when he was crucified. But if you notice, in this photo, the thorny crowns aren't bringing any blood out of Barack Obama's forehead or anything. It's as if he's too godlike to be hurt by such a human thing. In the next photo, you'll see Barack Obama in a most unusual pose. Now, a lot of people ask me about this. Now, I recognize this position immediately. If we go to the next photo, you will see this is the Hindu god known as Shiva. Shiva was known as the destroyer. She was one of the three major gods of the Hindu faith. Now, interesting enough, the father of the atomic bomb, Alan Oppenheimer, when they first saw the very first detonation of the atom bomb going off, it was reported that when he was watching the detonation, he said, "I am become Shiva, the destroyer of worlds." And this is what Barack Obama wants to be attributed to. Yeah, he wants to be attributed as if he's some type of godlike or divine being, but I wouldn't want to be associated with someone who is known as the destroyer. And again, in this next Newsweek magazine cover, you will see it says the second coming. Barack Obama is supposed to be the second coming of the Messiah, of Jesus Christ? Oh, I think not. Again, we see in this next photo another Newsweek article, and look at that wonderful halo around his head. Again, some sort of divine attributes are being attributed to him. Now, Newsweek is really in love with this guy, because when we take a look at this next photo, you can see a number of other magazine covers and how they attribute this divinity, this apotheosis to him. Now, let me show you a very interesting photo, ladies and gentlemen. This is the rebuilt altar of Pergamum. It was a temple dedicated to Zeus, and Zeus was the head of the Greek pantheon, or the Greek gods. Now, when Adolf Hitler came into power, well, his ego was going to completely spiral, and he was going to have his own temple dedicated to him, since he was supposed to be a god also. And if you look, this picture should be familiar to a lot of you people who know your history, was the altar of Pergamum that Hitler had built for himself. Remember, it was attributed he was some sort of divine being. Now, interesting enough, ladies and gentlemen, take a good look at this next photo, and you will see, once again, this is the altar of Pergamum, but this one was built for Barack Obama in Denver, Colorado. You see the similarities? I don't think that they could possibly be missed. Now, again, going into the past, what were other dictators' views and opinions as far as gun control goes? Well, when we look at Vladimir Lenin, he said, in this photo, I want you to read along if you can, ladies and gentlemen, a system of licensing and registration is the perfect device to deny gun ownership to the bourgeoisie. You know, people like us, you know. In other words, he did get rid of the guns. Joseph Stalin, when he was speaking on gun control, he said, ideas are more powerful than guns. We would not let our enemies have guns. Why should we let them have ideas? In other words, they took the guns and now they want to put in the thought police. Pol Pot, who was the general secretary of the Communist Party of Kampuchea in Cambodia, on gun control, once he took away all the weapons, he went on literally mass genocide. From 1975 to 1977, if you'll see in the second photo, Cambodia established gun control all the way back in 56. So then in 75 through 1977, since these people had no means of protecting themselves, more than 1 million educated people were literally rounded up and murdered because they were standing up against Pol Pot, his dictatorship, and everything he stood for. Because they knew this is wrong, but those 1 million voices were permanently silent because they had no means of defending themselves against a government gone awry. Mao Zedong on gun control. He said, all political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns. That way, no guns can ever be used to command the party. Benito Mussolini, this was written in a newspaper article in May 28, 1922. Following upon the recent street fighting in Rome, the government has ordered the withdrawal of all permits to carry firearms in the city of Rome and the province. Look at how they took advantage of a very bad situation. The people were rioting in the streets. They wanted to get rid of Mussolini and his government because of the way they were already beginning to see it go downhill. So instead of the people getting their way, no. Mussolini sent out the police, and quite literally speaking, from that day forward, people's guns and their right to carry guns were all but taken away. Adolf Hitler, 1933, he said, to conquer a nation, first disarm its citizens. 2 years later, he wrote, this year will go down in history. For the first time, a civilized nation, if you want to call the Nazi regime civilized, has full gun registration. Our streets will be safer, our police will be more efficient, and the world will follow our lead into the future. Oh, come on, ladies and gentlemen. I think common sense must prevail here. He was saying that the streets will be safer, the police more efficient, and all this. That's nonsense. That is absolute hogwash. Again, like communism, it sounds great on the blackboard, but in practice, it doesn't work. Now, how does this compare to present date? Let's first pause for a moment and take a look at this very, very carefully. You will see the Bill of Rights, ratified December 15, 1971, Article 2 says, well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. You see, it's not just a militia that's allowed to carry weapons. It's also, by the Bill of Rights, the right of the people like you and me, to keep and bear arms. Now, why is that so? You read the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, everything else, you find out the reason we are instructed. We were actually instructed to keep and bear arms because if the United States of America ever became a tyranny, it would be the responsibility of the citizens of the United States to rise up and bring down that tyranny and replace it with a republic government. Remember, the Constitution says that the United States is a republic. It's not a democracy. It's a republic. And should the government get out of control and it ends up as a tyranny, as King George III of England he was called a tyrant for the way he was running England and the colonies in the United States. The responsibility of the citizens of the United States is to bring down that tyranny and to replace it once again with an honest government. Now remember, again, looking at the photo, it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yet, you move over, you see Barack Obama, he says, I don't believe people should be able to own guns. Why? I mean, it's a simple question. Why? You know what's really interesting about Obama's and his cronies' arguments to do away with the Second Amendment? They always point to the crimes and everything. You know, well, X amount of people have been shot, these people were hurt. You know what? Those are criminals that's committing the crimes. It's not honest people. Honest people have the right to bear arms. You don't see anything in the paper about honest people doing this or that. No. It's the criminals. Yet they want to penalize us because the criminals are the ones committing these acts. And if we look into history, remember, once all the arms are taken away, those government, those dictatorships could do as they want to, and that's including murder their own citizens. And again, if you remember this next photo, this is Dianne Feinstein's famous quote, and I swear, folks, I will never forget this. I've never heard anything this ludicrous in all my days. And yet, years before, she said, and follow along in this next photo, ladies and gentlemen. She said, I know the sense of helplessness that people feel. I know the urge to arm yourself because that's what I did. I was trained in firearms. I walked to the hospital when my husband was sick. I carried a concealed weapon, and I made the determination if somebody was going to try and take me out, I was going to take them with me. Now wait a second. If she said back then that she was trained in firearms and she would murder someone, or kill someone in self-defense, now she's flip-flopping and say, well, we've got to take all the weapons away. And you know what's interesting, ladies and gentlemen, when she made that statement about, taking all the weapons away and all this, she herself still has a license to have a concealed weapon, and she carries it in her purse. Now, if that isn't hypocrisy, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know the definition. Now, it's interesting when I think about all this gun control that's going on. What most people don't realize, and believe it or not, and this is interesting, this one is really interesting. You think about, how did Barack Obama and his cronies try to get all this together? What methods did he use to try to push this down our throats, And he fell back again to a similar ploy that other dictators had used in the past. When we look at in this next photo, you see Adolf Hitler. Adolf Hitler, and this is a direct quote from Mein Kampf, his book. He said, "The state must declare the child to be the most precious treasure of the people. As long as the government is perceived as working for the benefit of the children, the people will happily endure almost any curtailment of liberty and almost any deprivation." He surrounded him. Now, this is a direct quote from his book, Mein Kampf. You've got to make sure that the excuse you're doing any and everything for is for the sake of the children, our progeny, our hope, our future. Well, look at this next photo. This was a drawing of Mao Zedong who used children as props when he was taking away the guns from the Chinese citizens. In this next photo, you will see Joseph Stalin was also using children as props. Here's Adolf Hitler once again. He surrounded himself with these children when he announced he was taking away all firearms from German citizens. They just plucked at the heartstrings and said, "We've got to keep the children safe. It's for the sake of the children." Here is Hugo Chavez. He used children as props also when he was taking away the weapons. Fidel Castro. You can see he was surrounded by children wearing the same type of hat and wearing these false beard, emulating him when he was also taking away the guns. In this photo, you see Kim Il-sung, who was Kim Jong-il's predecessor. He used children as props when he was putting down gun registration and then eventually taking it away. And now for the granddaddy of them all, ladies and gentlemen, this picture says 1,000 words. How many of you remember this scene when Barack Obama was signing into legislation trying to take away weapons or saying these weapons can't be used and all this? Again, notice he is surrounded by children. And once he was signing this legislation into existence, he actually fell back on a quote Adolf Hitler used when he was writing down Mein Kampf. Barack Obama had stated, just like Adolf Hitler, the state must declare the child to be the most precious treasure of the people. This is a direct quote from Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. And this is what Obama was using when he was trying to justify taking the guns away from you and I. But as I said before, we go into the past. We see that this methodology was a tried and true one with other dictators throughout history. And now Barack Obama in the present is doing the exact same thing. Now, what did other dictators say about the New World Order? Now remember, the New World Order, the 7-part plan, was Dr. Adam Weishaupt's original 7-part plan and his idea when he was calling for a New World Order. What did other dictators have to say on this? Adolf Hitler stated, "National Socialism will use its own revolution for establishing a new world order." In this next photo, Fidel Castro, finger waving in the air and angry fist thumping on the lectern, demanded a new world order when he was in front of the UN General Assembly on October 12, 1979. Mikhail Gorbachev of Russia on the New World Order said, "Further global progress is now possible only through a quest for universal consensus and the movement towards a new world order." Even Muammar Gaddafi had been calling for a new world order. In this next photo, ladies and gentlemen, this one just tears me apart because Joe Biden, a week and a half before the Boston Marathon race bombings, he was calling for a new world order. You look at the quote on the photo here, he was saying the affirmative task that we now have is to create a new world order. Interesting. You look at this next photo, this obviously is the UN General Assembly. This was in 2009, Barack Obama himself, as the newly elected president, he also was calling for a new world order. And if you remember throughout the series, ladies and gentlemen, as I pointed out, this was not some type of new catchphrase or saying that George Bush had come up with. No. I can trace this back all the way through other dictators throughout history. And now you see Barack Obama is repeating the same marching orders of his masters in the order of the Illuminati. Now, this next one, ladies and gentlemen, this one really tickles me. Let's go through history and find out what, dictators had to say about lying to their people. Now, Vladimir Lenin, and here's the quote, he said, "A lie told often enough becomes the truth." And this is what he was doing with his people all the way through his regime, if you want. Adolf Hitler said, "Make the lie big, make it simple, keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it." And as always, now that we've taken a look into the past, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring it up to present date and see what Obama thinks about lying. If you look at this next photo, on the photo itself is a direct quote from Barack Obama. It was dated October 21st, 2010. He said, "The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide." Well, now, isn't that an interesting quote? Only people who have something to hide are the ones who don't want to tell the truth. Well, let's look at some of his famous campaign promises. If you take a look at this next photo, you see he made quite a list of promises. Now, this is just a partial list, but put your attention towards the bottom selection on this list. He says, and I quote, "I promise 100% transparency in my administration." 100%. 100%, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Well, let's go with what he says. Only people who have something to hide won't tell you the truth. Well, now let's take a good look at the lie that was Benghazi. On the night of September 11, 2012, a heavily armed group of between 125 to 250 gunmen attacked the American diplomatic mission at Benghazi in Libya, killing U.S. Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens, Sean Smith, Glenn Doherty, and Tyrone Woods. A number of days after this event, Obama then sent out Susan Rice, the then U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, to no less than 5 Sunday news talk shows on September 16, 2012, to say that the attack was a spontaneous one due to an anti-Islamic video on YouTube. That was the spin we were going to be fed. Now, interesting enough, 2 days after the attack, during a meeting on the Benghazi consulate attack, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton screamed at Representative Adam Kinzinger for suggestion that Benghazi was a terrorist attack. What's even more interesting is Hillary Clinton went on to say in a very loud, angry voice to Representative Adam Kinzinger that it's irresponsible to even suggest this is a terror attack. This is a YouTube video. We know that there are protests all over the world, and we need to be very careful how we're saying this. That was 2 days, remember, after the attack. And yet, in this next photo, you'll see General Carter Ham. General Carter Ham would later tell us that the military and the White House knew what really happened at Benghazi almost instantly. As a matter of fact, as I recall, he said it was under an hour that they found out this was a terrorist attack. 1 hour. And Hillary is here selling the line that this was a YouTube video event. And when she was cornered, if you take a look at this next photo, when she was finally cornered during a congressional hearing, Hillary yelled out, "What difference at this point does it make?" I was livid when I was watching this particular hearing. I couldn't believe she had the gall to say, "What difference does it make?" I would remind her to take a look at these 4 people in this next photo. This is why it matters. Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods, Sean Smith, and Ambassador Chris Stevens. 4 Americans were murdered. Miss Clinton, that's why it matters. And next day, the newspapers across the country were having a field day over Hillary's cold-hearted callousness over the death of 4 Americans. And she thinks she can run for the presidency and that she's a good example of a qualified leader? Well, in my book, anyone who would be that callous, that cold-hearted, doesn't belong in the presidency, let alone in our own government. Now, the big question people have been asking was, where was Barack Obama when all this was going on? The truth of the matter is, no one knows for sure. Sadly enough, we've been lied to again. You see, all that we know for certain is that at 5 p.m. on that day, Barack Obama was in a meeting for about a half an hour. 5 hours later, somewhere around 10 o'clock p.m., he was possibly on the phone having a conversation with Hillary Clinton. After that, he wouldn't be seen again until the next day. Now remember, this is 10 p.m. at night. 10:30 a.m. in the morning, more than 12 and a half hours later, after Obama had vanished, he reemerged and he was seen boarding an airplane going to Las Vegas on a fundraising campaign. Yeah, he completely went AWOL when this event was transpiring just to go on a political fundraising campaigns for one of his Democratic buddies. Now, when I was in the military, this was called dereliction of duty. Dereliction of duty in the military can be a court-martial offense where you will be executed. And yet, remember the words of Barack Obama. He said, "The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide." Okay? As the story progressed, if you take a good look at this next photo, you will see Barack Obama once again speaking on Benghazi. Barack Obama would eventually tell us that the Benghazi incident was nothing but a sideshow being used by his political opponents to suit their own political agendas. And all those involved are still saying nothing. No one in the administration is admitting to anything, though right now a lot of information are coming out through congressional hearings and such, and I have a feeling we are going to eventually get to the whole truth of what had been going on. And in the end, Susan Rice is promoted to National Security Advisor. Instead of being fired for her incompetency and her lying, she received a reward. And so did Sarah Hall Ingram. She was in charge of the IRS unit, if you remember that targeted Tea Parties and conservative groups during the IRS scandal. And now she received a promotion, and she also has received more than $100,000 in bonuses. But you know what's interesting? Remember, everyone involved in all these scandals have been saying, I know nothing. Well, you know, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one person that I can recall off the top of my head. When he said, I know nothing, I believed him. And if you look at this next photo, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to get a chuckle out of it, because that is the only person, Sergeant Schultz of the old TV show Hogan's Hero, who used to always say, I know nothing. He was the only person I've ever believed who ever said, I know nothing. And yet, we look at this next photo. Well, there's Jay Carney, White House Press Secretary, I know nothing, or he just doesn't admit to the truth. This next one, Eric Holder of Fast and Furious, he knew nothing. He said he knew nothing of what was going on. And now he's in charge of investigating the IRS scandal. This is insanity. But remember, this guy must be innocent. He says, I know nothing. And here we have Janet Napolitano, Department of Homeland Director during the Boston Marathon race bombing. She had been warned years before about the Sarnoff brothers, yet now she suddenly knows nothing either. And who could forget, of course, Kathleen Sebelius, Secretary of Health and Human Services over Obamacare? Of course, she knows nothing. How did this fail? What went wrong? Well, I don't know. And, of course, the one person who claims I know nothing more than anyone else is Barack Obama himself. I mean, he knew nothing about the IRS scandal, Benghazi, Fast and Furious, the DA scandal, Health and Human Services. I mean, for goodness sakes, folks. These are supposed to be the leaders of our nation, and they're all standing up there chiming the same song. We know nothing. Well, if they know nothing, why are they in charge? I don't understand how we have left the patients in charge of the asylum. If they know nothing, let's put people in who do know what's going on and fix the problems that we have. But remember, it was Barack Obama who was telling us his administration would have 100% transparency. And yet, we can't see anything. I mean, his idea of transparency must be Mississippi mud. Because trying to get the truth out of these people is like pulling teeth. And when it comes to his Obamacare lies, PolitiFact had awarded Barack Obama the lie of the year. As you can see in this photo of PolitiFact, they gave him 4 Pinocchios, and his lie was completely put out there for everyone to see. Remember, he said of Obamacare, you would be able to keep your doctor, you would be able to keep your insurance, you and your family would make in excess of $2,500 a year, because your premiums, the 4th one, would not go up. And we all know, ladies and gentlemen, anyone who's watched the news, well, let's change that. Anyone who's watched honest news stations, channels and such, we know that the nightmare has just begun. Give this Obamacare about another 4 or 5 months. Once we get towards the end of the midterm elections, the whole thing is going to blow up. I promise you, it's going to become disastrous, because it's now going to hit the employers. They're going to have to drop Obamacare because they won't be able to afford to. They'll pay some small fine and compared to how much they would have had to have paid for the coverage. And all the employees are going to have to go without health care, because they themselves, for the most part, won't be able to afford it. I've already seen quite a number of people who've tried to get Obamacare and such. Their premiums that was not supposed to go up. I've seen some double, some triple. I have seen some that have actually gone up 6, 7 times the original price that they had been paying for the same coverage. And mind you, a lot of the coverage they don't need, like single guys. Why would they need to take a health care benefit if they're pregnant? Guys don't get pregnant according to my medical background. Yet Obamacare forces them to pay for being pregnant, whether they like it or not. Because that money is going to go into the slush fund, if you would. So you're going to end up paying for a lot of things you don't want to begin with. And yet, if Obama's words are true, when he told us the only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people who have something to hide, if his words are really true, heartfelt and genuine, why hasn't he instructed Lois Lerner to divulge what she knows? Lois Lerner, if you remember, on May 22nd, 2013, and when she was involved in this IRS scandal, she said, "I've been advised by my counsel to assert my constitutional right not to testify." Excuse me, Mr. President. She must be a liar because she doesn't want to tell the truth. You said, by your own words, she must be hiding something. And if we look at this next photo, ladies and gentlemen, there's Kathleen Sebelius again. And she has now refused to testify before Congress. Now, Kathleen Sebelius, she's the outgoing Secretary of Health and Human Services. I mean, literally speaking, she was supposed to wait till November of this year, 2014, to leave her post. That would be right after the midterm elections. No, it seems Barack Obama has thrown her under the bus and right now is trying to get someone to replace her because Kathleen Sebelius is too much of a memory for the IRS scandal. I think he was trying to get rid of not just Kathleen Sebelius, he might be trying to get rid of others because they're too much of a reminder that Benghazi is not the only thing that's been going wrong in his government. The IRS is also in deep water. And let's not forget Eric Holder of Fast and Furious. More than 200 people are dead because of this, including a U.S. agent, and thousands of weapons have literally ended up in the hands of Mexican drug cartels. So, Barack Obama, I would ask you this. Where's the accountability? Where's the honesty? Where's the transparency? You promised us. You said your government would have 100% transparency. Where is it? Now, what about Obama himself? On the surface, we seem to know things about him, but then again, we just don't seem to know who he really is. Let me cite you some examples, ladies and gentlemen. Follow along with these photos as we go along, and you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, it seems that Obama doesn't want to support Christianity in any way. Remember, he was the one that said he doesn't believe we're a Christian nation. And in this next photo, you will see there was a cross on this one military Quonset hut-like building. It had a giant cross on it. But if you see in the photo on the right-hand side, Obama had ordered that cross be removed. Now that's a symbol of Christianity. Yet, Christianity is taking a beating under Obama's administration. Look at this next photo. You see this man kneeling before the White House, and the sign says, "Stand up for religious freedom." And in this next photo, you see this lady she was also arrested for her Christian beliefs. You see, you can't kneel in front of the White House. You can't have peaceful protests or anything in front of the White House if Christianity is involved in any form or shape. Yet, in this next photo, this was supposed to have been a parade. But Muslims blocked whole streets in New York City while they were praying. And not one of them were arrested. And so my question is, as we look at this next photo, he claims to be a Christian. But is he a Christian or a Muslim? Let's face it, he has dressed on and off like a Muslim throughout his entire life. And in the past, he has definitely shown preferential treatment in matters regarding the Islamic faith. There was a tweet, and Barack Obama said, and you can read it along, "I wish Muslims across America and around the world a month blessed with the joys of family, peace and understanding." And he was talking about the month of Ramadan, which is a very holy and sacred observance during that month for those in the Muslim or the Islamic faith. And in this next photo, here's a direct quote. Again, Barack Obama had said, in a 2007 interview with the New York Times, Obama recited the Muslim call to prayer in a perfect Arabic accent and then went on to say that the Muslim call to prayer was the prettiest sound on earth. Now, his opinion about Islam and those who oppose it is quite apparent. In front of the United Nations General Assembly, he said the future must not belong to those who slander the Prophet of Islam. That's a direct quote, ladies and gentlemen. You can find this on the net if you wish. He obviously favors the Muslim world and the Islamic faith. Let's look at this next photo for more proof. You will notice Barack Obama was bowing down to one of the Muslim leaders. I believe this guy was a prince. And then in his book, in this next photo, Audacity or Hope. Now, there is no way, and it's come out that Barack Obama used what's known as a ghostwriter. For words, he didn't write his book. Someone else did it for him. But he is quoted in that book as saying, "I will stand with the Muslims if the political wind shifts in an ugly direction." And what really tears at me, when I consider 9/11, take a look at this next photo. Look at these 6 people, ladies and gentlemen. Because he has allowed 6 known members of the Muslim Brotherhood to work in his administration. These people are known to have direct connections and ties to the Muslim Brotherhood. And yet, they're supposed to be working in the best interest of you and me? Oh, I think not. Now, another thing about Barack Obama, a lot of people have brought up in the past, have asked me this, and let's just take a look at this next photo. You can see this is the infamous symbol of Masonry. People have asked me, is Barack a Mason? Now, all this brouhaha comes about because of this next photo. In the May 24, 2008 edition of Newsweek, once again Newsweek, it shows Obama hanging up the presidential seal, but on his right index finger, he's wearing a Masonic ring. Now, when we blow that picture up, you can see that is, the square and the compass. You can see on the first photo, it's a small one, but when we blow it up even larger, there's absolutely no doubt that it is a Masonic ring. Now, and here we have Barack Obama holding on to some sort of Masonic award, And others have said Obama is actually aspiring to become a brother in the Masonic Order of Javelin. Going back a number of years to when he graduated from the Panahu School in Hawaii, you can see Barack Obama here is shaking the hands of, I'm assuming that's the chancellor of the university. Now look in between Barack and that chancellor, and you will notice a large G in the background. The G is always emblematic of the Masons. You know, the G stands for the Grand Geometrician of the Universe, in their own words, or who is identified, if you read their writings, as their version of God. Now, take a look at the way Barack Obama is shaking the Chancellor's hand. You see how he's got part of it cupped in like this. It's this part, and it's cupped into the Chancellor's hand. And if you notice, the Chancellor has his thumb over the knuckles of Barack Obama's hand. Now in this next photo, take a good look. This is straight from the Masonic Handbook now. This is the secret handshake of a second-degree Mason. It's called the real grip of a fellow craft Mason. So there are quite a number of things that are strongly suggestion he could very well be a member of the Masonic organization. Obama, again, seems to also have things, not just against Christianity, but also about the way he looks at Americana. You see, this next photo, read the quote along with me. Barack Obama stated of the Constitution, he said, "The Constitution is an imperfect document, and I think it is a document that reflects some deep flaws in American culture." Well, isn't that interesting? I think we're beginning to take a look at something here that promises to show us something really big and important. But let's go on. In this next quote, as you can see it, ladies and gentlemen, Barack Obama, when he was senator on March 31st, 2008, he said, "The biggest problems that we're facing right now have to do with George Bush trying to bring more and more power into the executive branch and not go through Congress at all. And that's what I intend to reverse when I'm President of the United States." Oh, really? Really? We look at this next photo. Obama, I believe it's up to, I think the count is over 18. It could be higher, but I believe at least there's 18 recorded time in which he's completely bypassed Congress to get what he wants. He went on as much as say, "I have a pen and I have a phone." Well, I have news for you, Mr. Obama. Take a look at this next photo. We still have a Constitution. That Constitution was designed to stop anyone from usurping power from the citizens. You have a pen, you have a phone, we've still got the Constitution. Don't forget that. And so you see, I think this is part of a very bigger picture. You see, if you notice, ever since Barack Obama entered into the White House, he's always blamed everything on either George Bush or on climate change. That's it. You can backtrack everything to climate change of George Bush. You know, there was a real man with a backbone. I mean, a real man's man who stepped into the presidency back in 1980. His name was Ronald Reagan. Never once, when he stepped in, did he blame everything on Jimmy Carter. No. He took on the mantle of the presidency, and he made it work. He was known as the great communicator because even though the Democrats held, sway over, the houses at the time, he was able to sit down, talk to them, communicate. Let's talk and reason these things out. What does Obama do? I've got a pen, I've got a phone. This is all the reasoning I need. What can I say, ladies and gentlemen? The more we look at Barack Obama, the more it isn't getting any better. Because if you remember, he claims he wasn't born in Kenya. Yet, if we look at this newspaper article from the Sunday Standard, it completely points out Kenyan-born Obama all set for U.S. Senate. This is when he was becoming, the Senate hopeful and all this type stuff. And here it is. It was reported June 27, 2004, that this Kenyan-born person was just become a U.S. Senator, is now positioned to do his job. And if that isn't enough, if you look at the sign, one of the signposts that welcomes you into the country of Kenya, it says, "Welcome to Kenya, birthplace of Barack Obama." So, is he trying to tell me that everyone in Kenya and the Kenyan government are all wrong? They don't know what they're talking about? Interesting enough, as I said, the more we try to look into Barack Obama, well, we think we know things about him, but then again, there's so much it seems we don't know about him. I mean, he has spent, interesting enough, $1.7 million on hiding things. My question is, what has he got to hide? Remember, according to what he said, only a person who doesn't want to say the truth has things to hide. So my question is, what is he trying to hide then? What we do know about him, and this photo will prove it, he has spoken in front of the Council on Foreign Relations in the past. When he was running for the presidency, he was pretending to be concerned with GMOs. We look at this photo, if you look at the top very carefully, he is quoted as saying, as president, he vowed he would strive to let folks know when their food is genetically modified because Americans have a right to know what they're buying. And now, once, he had made the presidency, he has actually passed a law that protects Monsanto. After having placed former Monsanto VP Michael Taylor as head of the FDA, he signs into law House Resolution 933, which protects companies like Monsanto from having to label their genetically modified food. I thought he was one of those people who thought lying was a no-no. Here's Barack Obama standing in front of a podium promising hope and change. I only have one question at this point. Is this the hope and change we were supposed to be getting? Is this what we were expecting to get? Because if this is your version of hope, I don't want it. This is nothing but a reflection of things, as we've already gone over, ladies and gentlemen, of other Illuminati dictators in the past. And when we look at this photo, ladies and gentlemen, you can see other dictators, as I said, Hitler, Castro, Gaddafi, Stalin, Idi Amin, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, Kim Jong-il, all involved as puppets or directly in the order of the Illuminati. Now, I know that was a lot of information we've just gone through, ladies and gentlemen, but remember, as I said before, if we were going to understand the present, we first had to go into the past. And if you notice, once we brought the past up to the present and made all these comparisons, you can see not only has those dictators in the past been following the 7-part plan of the order of the Illuminati towards the creation of a new world order, you can tell Barack Obama is doing the same thing, and what he's also doing, among other things, is bringing down Americana and everything our people in this great nation stands for. Because that is, in essence, if again, going by the writings of the Illuminati, that is part of what needs to be done. If the Illuminati is going to take over and establish their new world order through their puppets, through their own people, they've got to bring down this great nation of America if they're going to take over. And ladies and gentlemen, I warn you, as throughout this entire series, we have got to wake up before it's too late. Because truthfully, ladies and gentlemen, if people aren't going to do anything, the Illuminati, before you realize it, will have everything in their back pockets, and suddenly, overnight, and without warning, something is going to happen to where this great nation is going to be shut down, and the Illuminati will take over. At that point, ladies and gentlemen, God help all of us. This next and final section, at least in DVD 13, we're going to take a look now, as I said, we're going to take a look into the future, to the coming Antichrist and his future government. Now, remember, everything we based our entire arguments upon were based on the original 7-part plan of Dr. Adam Weishaupt to create a new world order. Now, using this 7-part plan, let's take a look in the future, according to the scriptures, to the nature of the Antichrist and what his government will be like. When we take a look at this next photo, ladies and gentlemen, you can see, as I said, this is the coming Antichrist government, and we're going to compare it to the 7-part plan as written by Dr. Adam Weishaupt. Now, the first part of Dr. Adam Weishaupt's plan called for the abolition of all ordered government. When he said ordered government, he was talking about established governments, what they were back then in his day and age. And he was going to set up his version of a new government, or if you would, a new world order. Now, going to Revelation chapter 13, verse 7, it says, "And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations." So, everything literally is going to be handed over to the Antichrist. Ordered government is out, and the reign, the dictatorial, the global dictatorial reign of the Antichrist will begin. So all power is vested into one person now. It's no longer a division of all nations and governments. It's all vested into one person known as the Antichrist. When we take a look at this next photo, we see points 2 and 3 of the 7-part plan. Part 2 calls for the abolition of private property, and the third part calls for the abolition of inheritance. Now, in Revelation chapter 13, verses 4b through 5, it says, "Who is like unto the beast? Who was able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies. And power was given unto him to continue 42 months, or 3.5 years." You see, private property and inheritance will be gone at that point, because remember, everything is now in his hands. Everything. And when I say everything, I'm talking about absolute control of all things is going to be handed over to the Antichrist. Just think of, let's say, Adolf Hitler. Everything was under Adolf Hitler's control. If he said this will be done or that won't be done, it happened. Think about how much greater this control is going to be when it's global and it's under the Antichrist himself. This next part the abolition of patriotism, which is part 4 of Dr. Adam Weishaupt's plan. Now, let's think of patriotism here. In Revelation chapter 13, verses 16 to 18, it says, "And he causeth all," now that's all, "both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So you see, all people of this world is going to have to pledge their loyalty to the Antichrist. And there is one of 3 ways this can be done according to Revelation 13, 16 through 18. There is a mark, a name, or a number that you can, by the Bible's description here, have placed under. Now this is interesting. If you notice, it says, let's see. Okay, in verse, the very first verse, verse 16, drop down halfway and it says, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. In other words, these 3 identification marks are going to be subdermal. It'll be under the skin. So whatever they're going to place under the skin, and this can be done, medically speaking now, they can do it through a laser. They can place a mark, a name, or a number, if they want, under the skin, or what's known as subdermal. And it's under the right hand or the forehead. And this is going to show your allegiance, your patriotism to this one global dictator. Now, if you don't show your patriotism, your allegiance, your loyalty to this man, you will not be able to buy or sell anything. Nothing. So how will you be able to buy food? How will you be able to sell anything if you wanted to try to survive without the mark if you don't have the mark, the name, or the number? You see, whoever controls your power to buy or sell controls your life. This is why the Bible warns us that there will be a mark, a name, or a number. And without it, you won't be able to buy or sell anything. So this will be your sign of allegiance, your mark of loyalty to the Antichrist. There will no longer be anything like patriotism to one's nation, to one's country. No, you will be pledging allegiance directly to the Antichrist, or you will pay the price. And many people in those days, the Christians, will be beheaded because they refuse to take the mark, the name, or the number. Look that up in Revelation chapter 20, verse 4. We find out the 5th part of Dr. Adam Weishaupt's 7-part plan called for the abolition of all religion. In Daniel chapter 11, 37, when we, 37 and 38, when we're speaking of the Antichrist, it says, "Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor regard any God, for he shall magnify himself above all. But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his father knew not." The God of forces is identified in the Bible as Satan. Another one of his attributes given to Satan, he's also known as the prince of the power of the air. The forces, the natural forces of God's creation. This is who the Antichrist himself will worship. He will not worship the God of his father, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob. No, he is going to be worshiping Satan. And Revelation 18:23b tells us, "For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived." Not some. It said all the nations are going to be deceived through the occult. It's going to be handed over to the Antichrist. And you find out eventually, after he sits upon the throne of David, in the 3rd temple, the rebuilt temple in Jerusalem, he will be possessed by Lucifer himself. And if he wasn't a madman then, he's going to show us what a whole new definition of madman's going to be for those poor people who's going to have to live through the tribulation period. Part 6 and 7 calls for the abolition of the family and the creation of a new world order. Revelation 13:7b tells us, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations. Revelation 13:10 says, he that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. You see, at that point, the family unit is all but destroyed unless you have a Christian family. You see, remember, every individual is going to have to pledge their loyalty to him, to whoever this Antichrist figure is going to be. And it's because of all the events we've just seen, and just some of the events. This is not the whole picture of the book of Revelation. These are just some small examples. But if you look at the whole, you can see beyond a shadow of a doubt, the Illuminati, going by the 7-part plan of Dr. Adam Weishaupt, number 7, to create a new world order, will happen. It agrees perfectly with the scriptures. The scriptures prophesy that this new world order will take over and it will have the world for 7 years. So, one last thing we need to take a quick look into, and I want you to this is just one small comparison, if you would, if we look in the past very quickly, and I say this because of what we're talking about now in relationship to the Antichrist. If we take a look back on September 11th, 1962, this man who's up there right now, Gino Lucetti, he attempted to assassinate Benito Mussolini, but Mussolini had survived. This next photo. In the Wolf's Lair, as it was known, on July 20th, 1944, using a briefcase bomb, Klaus von Stauffenberg attempted to assassinate Adolf Hitler in what was known as Operation Valkyrie. Now, others were hurt. I remember this history very well. Others were hurt, but Adolf Hitler almost basically got away without a scratch. And he claimed this was divine providence proven. He had the divine right to rule over Germany. This is probably the only photo I'm aware of which shows that there has been a number of assassination attempts on Barack Obama, but very, very few, if not none of this, has ever been heard of in the past. This seems to have been one of the greatest cover-ups going on right now during the Obama administration. But then again, what do I know? Maybe concealment is his version of keeping the promise of 100% transparency. Now, again, this is things that have happened in the past. Dictators and such, they have been trying to assassinate them, and according to the Bible, we look at Revelation 13:3, and in the future, the Antichrist will also have an assassination attempt on his life. We find out he receives a deadly wound. Now, by deadly wound, my best understanding of the Greek translation renders that this is a wound unto death. It could kill a normal person, but for some reason, it just doesn't seem to kill the Antichrist. And so you see, ladies and gentlemen, when we go to the past, we can make sense of the present. I'm sure by now you can understand with a much clearer perspective what's going on right now under the Obama administration and why they're behaving the way they have been behaving. I think it makes a lot more sense. And again, when we take all this and bring it to the future, we can see how the Antichrist is also going to be aligning up himself and his form of government or dictatorship along with the 7-part plan as written by Dr. Adam Weishaupt to create a new world order. And once we apply the past, the present, and the future together. It really does all make sense now, doesn't it? What I hope, ladies and gentlemen, as always, is you will take what you have learned and share it with your friends. See, I can sit up here, as I've said in the DVD series before, I can sit up here and give you every little ounce of knowledge I possess, but if you're not sharing with others, if you're not trying to win the souls of the lost, what good is anything I've got to say with you? You've got to take the information, share it with your friends, and spread it out. This way, truth becomes dominant. Not the truth, as Barack Obama and other dictators have said is truth. No, I'm talking about genuine, honest, hardcore, 100% undiluted truth. Take it, ladies and gentlemen. Share it with others. Lead others to salvation. And God be praised. I pray He blesses you along the way.